Hey everyone, Pugs here with two new reviews for y'all. Today I'm covering Squidtastic Voyage and That's No Lady, another two episodes that people don't talk about very much, but I think these are both more memorable than the last pair. Just another bunch of quintessential Season 4 episodes too. But anything else I could say about these episodes is better left for the real review, so I'll just move on to my tried and true thank you to everyone watching today. As of writing this script, I recently hit 200 subscribers, which is awesome! And yes, I'm aware that this video will be coming out like a month after hitting that milestone, but such is the way when you're trying to record way in advance because of moving and all that stuff. Alright, that's enough of that. How about we just get right into it? The first review of today's video is Squidtastic Voyage, which for whatever reason is an episode I've seen a lot. I'm not really sure why. Maybe it has frequent reruns or something. I don't go out of my way to purposely watch this episode unless I pop my Season 4 DVD in the player or something. But yeah, I'm very familiar with these 11 minutes. Squidtastic Voyage begins with the French narrator, which is random, but a nice surprise. I like that the French narrator, or Frenchie as he will be called in the future, is able to get in on the comedy too. SpongeBob and Patrick's dancing in this beginning scene isn't particularly funny or even that entertaining, but it does remind me of Jellyfish Jam, so there's that, I suppose. Things get more interesting when Squidward's clarinet gets lodged inside his throat. The whole part where SpongeBob tries to get the clarinet out and the two start making a bunch of noises while a parrot and kid are walking outside is hilarious. One thing I like about Squidtastic Voyage is that we get to see Sandy and Squidward interact for once. I don't even think we'd even seen Squidward in a water helmet before this. Unfortunately, this episode doesn't spend enough time with these two interacting, but at least the bit we do get is good. I like how for once Sandy is not the practical level-headed one, or at least she isn't completely playing that role. I mean, yeah, she's level-headed, but as shown by her reaction to Squidward's suggestion of shrinking the reed, she isn't exactly practical here. I also love how Sandy just karate chops Squidward out of commission, instead of doing something safer like anesthesia. I guess karate chopping is faster. From here, Squidtastic Voyage starts progressing in a way that reminds me a lot of Sandy's Rocket, with Patrick entering the fold and convincing SpongeBob to stop doing the sensible thing he is doing and go inside Sandy's machine. Patrick is kind of very dumb in this episode, which at times is entertaining, like the shrink joke, and at times is not that, like everything he does to screw the mission when they're inside Squidward. The bit where Squidward finds out what's going on is pretty funny. I think this episode has some good jokes, they're just kind of spread out. My normal chronological style of reviews doesn't quite lend itself to this episode because I don't really have all that much to say about this next part where SpongeBob and Patrick are first traversing the inside of Squidward's body. Please, no, that's what she said jokes. I already hate having to say these plot points. Don't make it worse. Anyway, Patrick being an idiot ain't all that funny, and at points is kind of frustrating. And honestly, the comedy only gets good when the episode cuts back to Sandy and Squidward. I liked Squidward's nervous reaction when Sandy's all like, "What are you trying to do, kill him?" Also, the part where Sandy has an oblivious Squidward sign a waiver is literally hilarious. And when SpongeBob and Patrick start hitting Squidward's brainstem and Squidward starts having a bunch of uncontrolled movements, including kicking Sandy in one of these uncontrolled movements, that was another funny moment. Now, it's definitely a load of shit that this would happen if your brainstem was being hit like that, but I can enjoy artistic liberties. Considering that the brainstem is all about controlling your basic survival functions like breathing, heartbeats, etc., if something like what happened to Squidward happened to you, you'd probably die. And that's on the cognitive neuroscience class I took a couple years ago. Anyway, while the moments with Sandy and Squidward carry the episode for me, the SpongeBob and Patrick segments do have their moments. For example, I liked the delivery on the line when SpongeBob's like, "Mayday, we're sinking, and Patrick won't stop screaming!" I also liked how Patrick had a sudden moment of genius, as he is wont to do sometimes. Although I know this is all for comedic effect, I like to think of this moment as either remnants of the brain coral from Patrick's Smartpants or as foreshadowing for Patrick's infamous line in the card. Either interpretation works for me. And I like how the thing that ends up solving the reed issue is the dancing we saw earlier. That was a good callback and some sensible, cohesive writing. Then there's the ending of this episode, which low-key is just body horror to me. I mean that in the most joking way. I love how instead of ending with the immediate aftermath of Patrick hitting the grow button, we cut to what I assume is at least a day later. SpongeBob reporting for duty at the Krusty Krab is somehow cute, even though we literally don't even see him, and then the ending line with Patrick is just hilarious. Good ending. Squidtastic Voyage is a fun episode with some good jokes here and there, but it's not chock full of them. While this episode never gets boring by any means, there are times where the plot lulls a bit, but those times are infrequent. I also enjoyed the collection of characters of this episode, even though Patrick is by far the weakest out of all of them. I'd say this episode fits nicely in my good tier, where it comes in with a score of 7.8 out of 10. Next up is That's No Lady. I don't feel like leaving y'all in suspense, so let me just say that this is an episode that I enjoyed decently well. For whatever reason, this is an episode that feels particularly memorable to me. Like, it's not iconic or anything, but it's just memorable. I'm not even sure why. Nobody really talks about this episode, so I don't really know where I've gotten this impression from. I love how uncannily That's No Lady begins. Okay, that's not the right word, but I can't think of a better one. Like, Patrick's just running around the empty street, and then this guy comes up out of nowhere and starts yelling at him to get out of town. It's weird, but not in a bad way. And besides, Patrick's reaction is pretty funny. One thing I like about this episode is that it poses and solves the problem of this guy telling Patrick to get out of town in the same minute, which tells us that we don't have to worry about the salesman anymore, and focus entirely on what Patrick's about to do for the rest of this episode. Like, That's No Lady could have been an episode where the guy's motivations were revealed at the end, but that's not how it went. I like that. Anyway, I love how when Patrick tells SpongeBob what happened, the most alarming thing was that the guy had a briefcase. Frankly, if I was him, I'd be more worried about how the guy had a suit, given that there are multiple assassins in public fictional memory with a propensity for suits. Agent 47 or John Wick, anyone? Anyway, I love the whole goodbye scene between SpongeBob and Patrick, especially how Patrick just takes all of SpongeBob's stuff. Like, that was hilarious. Not to mention the wholesomeness intermixed in this scene with SpongeBob listing off all of the plans that he has with Patrick. Very cute. SpongeBob's attempts at finding a solution for Patrick are entertaining enough, and they finally land on the one that works. Cross-dressing! Living in the year 2024 has given me a critical eye when it comes to episode plots like this, whether I want to think of it that way or not. And I'm not trying to get on my normal soapbox either, although I will go ahead and put my soapbox sticker up here. But we do have to address that cross-dressing is somewhat used as a punchline here, not to mention the real, almost questionable stuff with Squidward and Mr. Krabs falling for Patrick, even though he looks the same with a wig and some lipstick on, and that being used as a punchline in the end. I don't think this episode is problematic or offensive, which, by the way, those are real words and phrases and concerns that have been slowly and sadly corroded over time. But anyway, I still think that it's important to acknowledge when certain aspects of episodes are not quite up to par. I still like this episode, and this stuff doesn't affect my rating, but I will talk about it because I can. And let me make it clear right now that I have no issue with cross-dressing. It's cross-dressing used as a punchline that I take issue with, depending on the severity and egregiousness of the joke. Because let's be real for a second and ask ourselves why we think cross-dressing is funny. It's transphobia, simple as that. We live in a highly transphobic society. I'm not surprised that cross-dressing jokes like this are common. This episode is very, very tame compared to some of the other stuff out there, which is why I don't think I have a true issue with it, but it's still worth acknowledging just for knowledge's sake and for the sake of learning from history. Moving on, we see everyone reacting to Patrick's new look and identity, and it is in these moments that I realize how uncomfortable I am with SpongeBob being involved in any kind of romantic pursuit, and also how thankful I am every day that they very rarely have him in these kinds of plot lines. The scene with Larry is fun at first, but then it goes on too long. Like, please move on. And I think my issue is just how heteronormative these scenes and plots are, and metanormative, now that I'm thinking about it. Yes, I'm getting on the soapbox again, I don't care. It's the exact kind of thing that annoyed me when I was much younger, and everyone thought my best friend and I were dating or had crushes on each other, you know, back when I considered myself to be a girl, but that's besides the point. It adds nothing to the comedy for me that Larry assumes that Patrick is SpongeBob's girlfriend, rather than simply a new female friend, and I question the decision behind doing that. Okay, my high horse is back in the stable now, we move on. We see the consequences of Mr. Krabs and Squidward's interest towards Patrick or Patricia once we get to the Krusty Krab. I gotta be honest and say that in this episode, those two are definitely pushing the limits of weird and moving well into Creepyville, but That's No Lady acknowledges this, so I'm fine with it. If y'all remember, though I'm not sure I ever quite put it like this, so maybe you don't, but this was one of my main issues with Enemy-in-Law. It didn't acknowledge that what Plankton and Mama Krabs were doing was just kinda weird. Not wrong, just weird. But this episode doesn't have that problem, even with Mr. Krabs and Squidward engaging in far more unsavory behaviors. Patrick is clearly uncomfortable with them, and for good reason. They're moving quickly into harassment territory. I'd argue they're well into that territory during this episode's runtime. Watching Squidward and Patrick try and fail to woo Patricia is entertaining, and I love how they're continually shut down. The fact that they're unable to take no for an answer is only uncomfortable when I get to overthinking, which, as y'all know, is my entire existence when watching this show, but for the most part, I'm able to look past my overthinking mind. The montage of Patrick repeatedly saying no as the pair are in increasingly weird areas is pretty funny. It does get weirder, though, when it turns out that it's not just Squidward and Mr. Krabs who are enamored with Patricia, it's the whole damn restaurant. That's just weird, and it feels kind of uncomfortable knowing that real people have to deal with this kind of treatment at work. Like, need I remind y'all that restaurants like Hooters and Twin Peaks exist? Enough said. At last, the charade comes to an end as the salesfish from earlier makes his reappearance. SpongeBob comes to defend Patrick, which then lets the cat out of the bag. And then we see the other shoe drop as the truth about the salesfish is finally revealed to the characters. And I love how Patrick absolutely has no shame in ripping off his disguise in front of everyone. Mr. Krabs' reaction is pretty funny because of his blunt questions and subsequent firing of Patrick, which I guess means that Bikini Bottom doesn't have any anti-discrimination laws since Mr. Krabs is firing Patrick solely because of his gender. And yes, I'm going to pretend that Mr. Krabs and Squidward's reactions are not rooted in homophobia, because let's be real, they absolutely are. I've already got on my soapbox, so I won't say more. But anyway, the episode ends nice and wholesomely with SpongeBob and Patrick running out of the Krusty Krab to work on their activity list, which was a cute little ending if I do say so myself. That Snow Lady is a good episode that doesn't have many problems other than being not particularly funny. Well, that and the casual transphobia and homophobia, but I've already expanded on that, so I won't here. Though I will say that the Larry scene was far too unenjoyable for me, so that will be causing some points to be docked. So all in all, I think that this episode deserves its spot in my good tier, where it comes up with a score of 7.5 out of 10. Obviously, this isn't quite everything I've got to say about this episode, but why don't I transition to my closing thoughts before getting into that? As always, gotta end this video with some closing thoughts of mine. Alright, y'all already know what it is. I've got more to say about That Snow Lady, so I already discussed the transphobic roots of this episode, so why don't I talk about the homophobic roots? Okay, so obviously we're meant to find Squidward and Mr. Krabs' pursuit of Patrick funny because we know it's Patrick donning the disguise of Patricia. We can all agree on that, right? Okay, so now the follow-up question is, why is that funny? Now, before anyone says anything, I don't think it's wrong to find this setup funny. I find it funny. But that's because there are two ways you can interpret this. It can either be funny because haha, Mr. Krabs and Squidward are pursuing a man, that's the homophobic version, or it's funny because Squidward and Mr. Krabs don't actually like Patrick, but they like this person who acts exactly like Patrick just because they believe he's a woman. I don't quite think this is exactly what the episode was going for, but because if so, it would have spent more time having Patricia act like a dunce just like Patrick, but luckily the characters involved allow for this interpretation to be made. But anyway, back to my point, since I can already tell I'm saying a whole lot of nothing. The entire basis of That Snow Lady, and particularly this comedy, is that it's supposed to be funny that Squidward and Mr. Krabs are falling for this trick, and are pursuing a man instead of a woman. That is both transphobic and homophobic. The ending of this episode makes it clear, because Mr. Krabs and Squidward aren't just surprised that Patricia is a man. They're kinda actively disgusted. I mean, I guess I could pretend that Mr. Krabs' reaction is more him realizing that he's bisexual, but anyway, I'm certainly not surprised by any means. And obviously I don't hate That Snow Lady, but I can't ignore this blatant, though likely unintentional, bigotry. And I'm also aware that That Snow Lady is far from the first episode of TV to do something like this. This is a tried and true trope. And guess what? It's just as transphobic and homophobic every time. Considering that I'm both gay and trans, perhaps y'all can see why I might want to discuss this, And also, one more thing. I don't have this written down on the script, so it's probably going to sound a lot less polished than everything else I just said. But the fact that, this episode's also the whole cross-dressing thing is transphobic because in universe they act like someone, like a man dressing like a woman. It's something that's impossible. The fact that this disguise is supposed to work, even though Patricia literally looks just like Patrick, implies that, it would be inconceivable that a man would dress as a woman, or that Patrick would just be trans. Or, Patrick can dress like that and still be a man, you know what I mean? There's just so many layers here that makes this transphobic and makes it so everyone's just stuck in these rigid gender roles and gender presentations. And I know I'm thinking way too deeply about an episode of SpongeBob, but it's because of these things in the real world that allow for this episode to be made. Do you understand what I mean? I hope y'all do. I'm sure that most of y'all watching have enough critical thinking skills to pick up what I'm laying down, if y'all get my gist. But I think I'm just going to go ahead and end the video here because I'm just rambling at this point and I'm going to have to add all of this to the script so I can have subtitles. So yeah, let me just end the video here and I will see you guys in the next review.